Hi, everyone. This is Hal Krosman with Screenwriting U. And even though it says week 1 up there, this is actually week 2. So pardon the typo. Uh, Welcome to Writing Hilarious Comedy. That's what we're doing today. So here's what we're going to work on today. Lesson 4, creating your structure. And even if you already know everything there is to know about structure, sometimes just having a reminder will wake up something or give you a new idea for things you can add to your story. And if you're not somebody who's really good at structure, the model I'm going to give you makes it really simple. Then we'll start our plot tracks. I think we have 3 of these. We're going to work with 2 of them today. The first one is the what if track. If you're trying to create a story that's outside the box, this is your key to success. Just asking what if questions and then trying to find something beyond what you already know. And then we'll work with plot track number 2, which is comedy subplots. This is like a gold mine for comedy. You can design subplots that take us beyond your structure, that build in these interesting and unique stories that are designed for comedy. So let's do it. First, creating your structure. We're using a 4-act. You can use a 3-act structure if you want, but really a 4-act is a 3-act structure with a strong midpoint. I think the biggest problem on the 3-act structure is people have a tendency to get stuck in that second act because it's 60 pages long. But the other reason why is because they don't have a strong midpoint. They have a midpoint that doesn't really change the story. So when we started looking at the 4-act structure, it's like what that does is it emphasizes the midpoint. Your midpoint, by the way, might be the most important part of your story. It depends. There are some stories where the midpoint, if you took that midpoint out, that screenplay never gets made. So just be open to that possibility. So the way this works, Act 1, standard Act 1, it's your setup act, right? You're establishing your characters, the setting, central comedic conflict. Takes us into Act 2, which is about a 30-page Act 2. This is where the confrontation starts. We've just stepped outside of our normal world. At the Act 1 turning point, we got locked into this new confrontation. Now we're going to present obstacles, conflicts, rising action. At the end of that, we have a midpoint that makes this the first half of the movie. The midpoint is strong enough that it sends us into an act by itself, which is the second half of what most people consider to be the second act. So here they're going to reevaluate. And the reason they're reevaluating is because the midpoint changed things. And this is where, again, when somebody doesn't have a strong midpoint, it's just a light turning point. It didn't change the whole second half of the movie. Our job is to have that midpoint, make this movie something where the first half, while we're on the same journey, the first half was at this level and the second half goes up to here. So here, when we get to this point, because of that strong midpoint, we have to reevaluate everything, right? You're forcing your protagonist to rethink, create a whole new plan, and it's significant. And we end up with, at the end of that, they've made some kind of change, but not enough. That brings us into the final act, which is your standard final act. You're going to have the climax, the resolution. The climax will bring the story to the ultimate expression of the conflict. That's its job. And then the resolution, you resolve it in a satisfying way. So let's take a look at this story, The Hangover. And I'm going to use The Hangover all the way through today so that we stay consistent and that it also makes it easy to be able to reference things. We don't have to bounce from movie to movie to movie. So this one, We start with Act 1. We've got the opening. We've got the guys out in the desert. They call the bride to be and tell her the wedding's not going to happen. So we know something went really wrong. Then we flash back to a few days earlier when they came to Vegas for the party. We've got Phil, who is the straight guy. We've got Stu, who's the conflict character. We've got Alan, who is a comedy character, and we've got Doug, who really is kind of the MacGuffin in the situation, the one that we're trying to find all the way through. But they get here. Let me back up just a second. Sorry about that. They get here, and now we have the inciting incident. Alan takes these guys up on the roof, and he spikes their drink, gives them a roofie, which changes their life completely. We now go to the turning point. They wake up in the morning. Everything in the room is trashed, and they suddenly make these discoveries. First, they can't remember last night. They have no idea what happened, but there's a tiger in the bathroom. Stu is missing that tooth right there. There's a baby in the closet, and suddenly they realize Doug is gone. They have no idea where he is. That takes us into Act 2. So now they have this new plan, and their plan becomes they're going to retrace their steps from last night, because all they know is Doug was with them on the roof, and then they don't remember anything after that. So, we've got these 4 mysteries that are happening: the tiger, the tooth, the baby, and Doug. And they got to figure it out. They got to find out. So they're going to retrace their steps. First step, then, we put the plan into action. They go to the hospital. It turned out that Phil had a tag on his wrist, a little bracelet that came from the hospital. They go there, and that's where they find out that they've been roofied. Now, they still have no idea how that happened or when that happened or any of those kinds of things, but they also find out that they had just come from a wedding. They go to the wedding chapel, and they find out that Stu got married last night. So they track her down. On the way to that, they're hoping to find Jade. On the way, they get arrested, which is like a difficult situation for them. They get arrested for stealing the police car, and now we go through the whole comedy thing where they are part of a demonstration, and these 4th graders get to tase them. Jesus. Midpoint. Oh, by the way, did I leave out? They go over to Jade's house during their plan, and they're in action. They go to Jade's place, her apartment, and now they find out that Stu married a stripper. So the midpoint on this, they hear something in the trunk, and they're sure it's Doug. They've looked everywhere. That was the one place they didn't look. They open the trunk, and this naked guy jumps out and beats the shit out of them with a crowbar. And in some cases, you'd say, well, I don't know that that's really a strong midpoint, but the truth is what it just did was it introduced the antagonist for the rest of the story. And it leaves them in a spot where they have no idea how to solve this. At that point, they've tried everything they could think of, and none of it has worked yet. That takes us to Act 3. So in Act 3, they come back to the hotel. They're going to rethink everything. They're thinking maybe Doug will be there. Maybe that'll be the solution. And as they step in, they find out Mike Tyson is there. And for some reason, he decides to knock Alan out. Turns out the tiger is Mike Tyson's. And he agrees if they bring back the tiger, he will show them the security footage so they can see if Doug was alive at the point that they were there. So they go back. It turned out Doug was with them, and that was at 3:30 in the morning. So now they only have a couple of hours to account for, and they put together a new plan. And their new plan is to tell Tracy everything and hope for the best. But instead, something happens here. A car sideswipes them. It's Mr. Chow, but he has a bunch of henchmen with him. And he tells them at that point, and this is their turning point of Act 3, he tells them that they stole $80,000 from him last night, and he wants it back, or he's not going to give them Doug. Now, I hope you remember all of this. Now we go into Act 4. So Act 4, they've got to do something. Essentially our climax and our ultimate expression of the conflict is somehow they have to resolve this situation with Chow. They do it by playing blackjack, and Alan wins back. This is our new Rain Man here. He wins back 80,000. He actually wins back more than 80,000, and they're okay. They go to the desert. They exchange the money to get Doug, but it turns out it's not their Doug. It's some other Doug. It's the drug dealer. So in the midst of that, which is kind of a tense exchange, they don't get their money back. All they've got is this new Doug. And he mentions something about roofies, and why do people say it's a roofie? If you're not on the roof, you're on the ground. And at that point, they figure it out. That brings us to the resolution. They go back, they find Doug, they tell Jade goodbye, and Stu asks her out on a date for next weekend. And then they return and have the wedding. One last thing that happens there. I think Alan finds a camera and they get to look at the photos of all the crazy ass things they did. Now, why I just walked you through all of this is so you can see it's like any great comedy is going to have a really well-created structure. And all you have to do is just start looking at the components and asking yourself, okay, if the midpoint happened here, what does it cause them to rethink? And what's their new plan? And how can that fail even worse right when we thought everything was going to work? You just start filling in the blanks and then seeing what's there. You also, in the midst of that, will get to see what's not there, right? Did you put this together and have a weak midpoint? Do you not have some kind of climax? Are you missing the strong inciting incident that forces them to go on this journey? Anything that's not there is an opportunity to brainstorm, and it gives you a chance to try something new. So that was lesson 4. That's the one that's up right now. You just simply go through and create the structure that you have. Once you've done that, we now go into lesson 5, and here you get to what if beyond that structure. So you're creating the structure first so that you have something to work with, but it's totally okay for you to elevate it to a new level. So on the what ifing, on plot track number 1, we have 3 different plot tracks that will ultimately build your story and your plot and your comedy into it. You start with your 4-act structure. You start asking what if questions to step outside the box and find new and unique ways to do it, especially if you have a structure that is similar to some other movie that's out there. But in general, we're not trying to change the 4-act structure. What we're trying to do is just elevate all of this. So you're stepping outside the box. We're looking for 2 things. The first one is conflicts, right? What would be some interesting conflicts that we could add to this story? The second is incongruent and funny moments. So in your what ifing, you're going to create some conflicts. That's what they did on this one, by the way. This story basically started with somebody who had been to Las Vegas and seen, and gone through a a pre-wedding party, gone through the bachelor's party. And then they stood back and said, how can I give that to an audience in a funny way? They added a whole bunch of conflicts and they added a whole bunch of incongruent and funny moments. So choose the ones that you like to make the story better, add them. This is sort of part of building your plot, which ultimately will become your outline. So interesting conflicts, adding those. Let's start with this question. And I'll give you some what ifs here. The purpose on the what ifs is to start to explore something. You ask what if, it doesn't just create a single scene. It could actually create so much in your story. So if we just took this one, what if one bad decision spiraled into more? That's what this was. Alan actually made this one bad decision. He went to a drug dealer, got what he thought was ecstasy, spiked their drinks. They're up there toasting to the night that they're going to have. Wow, what a wonderful thing. That one decision spiraled into almost everything that happened in this movie. Almost every bad thing and really almost every funny thing. So you start asking yourself, what if there was a bad decision that did that? And if so, what could it be? What would be the worst decision that these characters could make in this moment for your story? And then how could you play with it? Because remember, this is a comedy story, so it gives you a chance to start to, step out and try some new things. Another possibility is, what if we made this worse for the protagonist? And let's say it started out with Alan had spiked their stuff with ecstasy. So they were going to go do a whole bunch of things, but but they would remember them. How could we make it worse? We then take it to roofies where they don't remember. What if trying to fix it caused even more problems? We see that, by the way, with Stu. He's continually trying to fix that relationship in some way. And in order to be able to be at the bachelor party, he has to lie to her. And he tells her all these stories. And it causes more and more and more problems until ultimately we end up with what happens in the final act. What if the antagonist outplayed them? And when I say here, you can look at any point in the story and ask that. We start with the antagonist in this story outplayed him at one point, jumps out of the trunk, and instead of just running away, beats him up with a crowbar. And then it turns out we took it a step further. The antagonist is actually some mobster, and he hits him with a car. And then we take it a step further than that. They stole $80,000 from him. At least he thinks that. And he's going to kill Doug and all of that kind of thing, right? So this whole story came from asking a whole series of what ifs. And if you're willing to ask that and not stick with what you already have, go beyond it. If you're willing to do that, you can create something incredible. Now, we were asking the what ifs to get conflicts. And they do create some comedy, but let's take it a step further. Now we're going to ask the what ifs to add incongruent and funny moments. So what if a small task became hilariously complicated, right? And here's the small task. Hey, we got to find the groom. Now remember, it started out with, find Doug, let's go. They think he's in his own room, all of that kind of thing. They can't find him. Then they call him on the phone. The phone's there, right? It starts out being kind of small. And then they took it to the point of being really, truly, hilariously complicated. Almost all the funny stuff came out of, and a lot of the conflicts, them simply trying to find the groom. Where is he? What if something absurd happened? Over and over and over, we've got this in this movie. Even if we start with the smallest things, Stu marries a stripper. There's a baby in the closet. Mike Tyson, and punches them. Uh, there's just so many absurd things that they built in by asking those questions. What if it became awkward and embarrassing? Where could those moments be? And they happen all over the place, but one of them is Stu finding out that not only did he marry someone last night, but he married a stripper. And what if they did the wrong thing at the wrong time? Which toasting at the very beginning seems so small, but it was the wrong thing because they didn't know they were being roofied. And it was the wrong time because it was right before they decided to go out and, paint the town red. Your job is to be looking for these kinds of things. And you ask the questions and you start exploring, looking for possible incongruent or funny moments. If what you're doing is searching for that, you'll find it. If you just keep asking these questions, and along the way, you could look at every structure point and ask these questions. It's not something that this is only in the beginning. We've got a small task that becomes hilariously complicated, but it's not just that. It's like they get the cop car. They're going to the wedding chapel to find out what happened, and it turns into something completely different. Our job is to keep escalating this stuff and keep looking for something beyond what you already know. So, okay. And then comedy subplots. I think subplots in a comedy may be more important than any other genre. And the reason why is because they give you the freedom to create a lot of comedy, even if you've got a serious story, even if you've got a serious lead character as your protagonist, you can look at the comedy subplots and come up with all kinds of amazing things. Let's go with this guy. So a comedy subplot pairs one lead character, Alan, with a supporting character, this little guy right here, for their own storyline, right? That is funny. So the moment that we started with this baby, by the way, they could have done this as some kind of tragedy. They find the baby, it needs help. We go down this line, and let's say we're in a drama. We could have ended with the baby dying or something like that. They went the opposite way because it's a comedy, and we had all kinds of things that happened out of this. But comedy subplots typically include these things. You've got a humorous premise. And I'm gonna actually give you a different comedy subplot in just a moment. But this guy deciding that he's actually the dad and he names his kid Carlos. And now these two are going to be together every step of the way. Was kind of funny, I thought. You escalate it. So, where we end up with the kid is at a different level. And then you give it a beginning, a middle, and an ending. So those are your subplots. And don't worry, all of this is in the lesson. It's in lesson 6. But let's look at one of them right now. Let's take this one. Stu married a stripper. This is a subplot. And there's a transformation. So there's a beginning, a middle, and an end. He goes from a whipped pup to standing up for himself. That's Stu's transformation that happens almost entirely in this subplot. We've got some contrast here. Melissa is all about rage and domination. And take a look at her. There she is. She looks like the monster from Alien here. But she's constantly either dominating him or she's in rage, this is what she is at the end. This is at the wedding, by the way, when he's telling her that he's decided to change some things. The contrast is with Jade, who is very happy and easygoing. So the transformation, part of it has to do with this relationship with Jade that turns out to be the opposite of Melissa. So they made that choice. And again, the relationship, him marrying a stripper, actually caused his transformational journey. So he again went from an abused boyfriend to standing up in the end. Now let's just look at it for a moment. Here's Jade. Here's the subplot. It starts with the mystery of the baby. So I want you to notice, you could start it with them finding out right off the bat that he got married, and going from there. But the way they did it was they created a mystery around it by putting the baby in there. Baby's in the closet. No one has any idea how it got there. Alan adopts it, names it Carlos. That makes it funny. Then from there, we go to the Vegas wedding chapel. They're asking about Doug. They're trying to figure out what happened last night. They have no idea what really happened. Eddie shows them the wedding book, and at that moment, they find out that Stu was the one who got married, and he married Jade, a woman he can't remember. So that takes us to Jade. The guys meet Jade because they've now got an address. They know where she is. She excitedly kisses Stu, which he's reacting to, which is funny. She calls him the daddy of her child, the baby that we just saw. And then at the end, Stu, who is a status-seeking guy, like if you look at all the times he told somebody he was a doctor when he was really a dentist, if you look at that, it's like, this is the one thing that he doesn't want to happen. He just married someone who is a stripper. That takes him to a whole different level. Now, a couple of steps more. At the end of it, and there is another thing in there, but I just wanted to make this simple. At the end of it, with the marriage annulled, they get the marriage annulled. Stu says goodbye to her. She gives back the ring, which is one of the things he was deeply worried about. And then he asked her out on a date for next weekend when he comes back, and she graciously accepts. So part of what this just did was it took us to the next step with him. When Melissa finds out, he's now got a future that is outside of Melissa. He knows he can come back and have a date with her, and ultimately maybe have some kind of relationship with somebody like Jade, who is not this scary person. So when Melissa confronts him, he finally gets it. He dumps her and becomes the life of the party again. Now, there's a whole bunch of comedy in there, but there's also a subplot that matches this story, that fits, that gives him a transformational journey, that is meaningful for what's happening. So be thinking about this. When you're creating subplots, you're looking at your lead characters and your supporting characters. And if you've got some funny supporting characters, you're looking for, how can I make this a story that will build into my bigger story and intentionally create comedy. Again, this subplot could have been done in a way that was just entirely serious, but they made sure that it was funny. And each of the other subplots are the same thing. So again, I just want to remind you on this, give yourself the freedom to create. Start looking outside all the right answers. This doesn't mean violate your story, but it means start thinking of new and unique ways that you can do it. Use the 10 bad ideas to get a great one. So if you can't figure it out, that's okay. Come up with the 10 worst ideas you can and start your creative mind creating and generating things, and see what then comes because of that. Celebrate trying new things, even if they don't work. If you're trying something brand new, if there's something we're giving you here that you haven't done before, your job is just to do it and then see what happens, and then try it again. And if there's something that doesn't work about it, if you can fix it and move forward, or if you just need to get more comfortable with it, do that. Brainstorm without criticism. Don't be a critic. A critic isn't smarter They're just somebody who is ruled by their own fears. Don't do it. Stop criticizing yourself. Just give yourself the freedom to try things. And it's a win if you just try and write something down. So please be that way. If you get stuck for even a second, empower yourself, go to AI, lower your standards, try whatever strategy you need, brainstorm with somebody else. Don't let yourself be stuck even for a second, right? And really, truly, in my world, what I try to do is if I get stuck for more than 30 seconds, if I can't figure something out in 30 seconds, I immediately start trying other strategies. And sometimes, again, sometimes the strategy is brainstorm. Sometimes I just pitch it to people and see what comes to me in the midst of the pitch. So just start, if you start to feel stuck, whatever strategy you're working on at that moment has stalled out. That doesn't mean anything bad. It just means it's run out. Go to a different strategy. And please value moving forward over being perfect. Moving forward might mean, okay, I'll write in the 2 or 3 ideas I have here. My structure still isn't perfect. I'm going to allow it to process. I'm going to keep brainstorming things. Sooner or later, it'll come to me. I'm going to keep moving forward. This right here, especially if you're a perfectionist, you know this has kept you from accomplishing some of your goals. I haven't met a perfectionist yet that doesn't have issues because of that strategy. Please let go of being perfect when you're trying to create. Use that when we get to the final drafts. That's where it's valuable. Okay. Now, having said that, this week's assignment. Lessons will be posted. I've already posted the 4th. So lessons 4 to 6 is what you're going to do this week. It's the ones that we just talked about. Please create a version of your story that you can move forward on. And this is at every step. Just create some kind of version you can move forward on. Again, we'll get to perfection at the end. Again, it's better to have a bad version than to shut down because you don't have the perfect one. I hope everybody gets that already. And please have fun. So Q&A. Present your question succinctly. Don't tell a long story. If you're telling me a long story, it's because you haven't figured out your question. So present your question succinctly. Tell me what the question is. The focus is this class, the material we're covering. Please don't make a case to prove a fear. When you hear somebody telling a long story, especially when they're talking about their process and they're making a long case, it's because they're coming from a fear or they're trying to manipulate the situation. Please don't do that. Be open to the answers. And let's start with breakthroughs. So hang on. There we go. If you have a breakthrough, go down to the React button and click the React button and click the words raise hand. Give you a moment to think about that. There we go. There are more coming up. Who else? There you go. All right, let's go to Brenda. And
hi, can you hear me?
I can hear you now.
So mine was kind of in the pacing when I was looking at the 4 acts, trying to break it down so that it came out with your midpoint where it was supposed to, etc. And mine is in a cafe, so it's really contained, almost like you would see a Friends comedy, a 30-minute, but it's 60-minute. So there's really 2 questions there. On a comedy like Friends, is a 60-minute too long for that kind of comedy? Does it become kind of ongoing because it's simpler comedy?
Okay, hang on. I got to ask you, are you asking a question or are you telling us
I'm asking 2 because my breakthrough was on my pacing.
Okay, let's come back. We're going to do breakthroughs first and then you can ask questions. So just keep your hand up. I'll come back to you for questions in a few minutes. Let's go to Joe.
Yeah, Hal, when I get stuck and I go to AI, it's surprisingly helpful because it always comes up with 10 bad ideas and never a great one. But I cobble a couple together and it just keeps me moving forward. And it surprises me, but it does. So I think when I get uncreative, it sparks being creative again. So I find it just very helpful. I probably did it 10 times in the last week.
Spectacular, spectacular. And I hope everybody gets that. It's like there should be there should never be even a full minute when you're stuck. So, Joe, thank you for saying all of that. I think like when people say, "Oh, AI isn't a good writer." I don't care if it's a good writer. All I care is that it helps you think outside the box, like what Joe was saying, that it helps you in the moment you're stuck. It gives you a bunch of other ways, and you can pick whatever works for you. Or in the midst of it, it might trigger some kind of creativity you hadn't thought of. So well done, Joe. Eugene.
Yeah, I want to say I think that the AI really helps the chat GPT because it first tells me what I do right, then what I could add, and then gives me a compliment at the end. So it's very positive. I don't know if I told you, but I'm writing this feature film with a writer's room. There's 4 other writers in the room. And boy, can they be critical. Even though I am like a showrunner, I call myself the pro runner because I'm a producer on the project and the lead writer. Okay. But I would be totally discouraged if I just listened to the other writers because I think the ChatGPT is much more positive, for me. Maybe it's because it's the way you set it up, Hal, but it really makes me feel better about some of the things I think that I wrote that work, even though they got criticized, probably because they're way outside the box. So
Yeah.
Mhm. Yeah.
Good for you. Good for you. Yeah. So I won't say much more about that, but if they're focused almost entirely on criticism, I'd be having a different conversation. I'd sit down and say, hey, here we have certain things we're doing. If that's the majority of what they're giving you, I would be rethinking your processes. But that's up to you. But thank you, Gene. Well done. Let's go to Kristen.
Hey, Hal. I hope everything's okay with everybody over there at your house.
We are. Everything's safe now. We're okay. It started raining, so that made our lives better.
Excellent.
What's happening with you?
Well, what's happening with me is, as you know, I've been really not struggling with the story that I was doing. I've been enjoying it a lot, but it kept not being funny. I mean, I knew it was funny inside of my head, but it wasn't funny on the page. You know what I mean? It was sometimes I would write a scene and the scene could be funny, but I was like, I don't know why. And so what happened for me and everything we're doing in this class so far is just, it's so obvious how to make it funny. And I'm kind of like going like, what I do, like, you dumb head, how did you miss that? Like, cause it's kind of obvious how to make it funnier. And each one of these little comedic elements that you're giving us is just right on target. And so my little brain said, I feel like I'm looking through binoculars, and I just went and like focused them. And it's like things are coming clear to me now. In a way, I mean, I've been working on the story for a long time, and it was out of focus. So thank you. It's working.
Excellent. I'm so happy about that. And yes, that's our job on this is to it. And this is, by the way, this is kind of what I was saying to Eugene. It's like if he's got a process that is causing him to feel bad, and maybe not really helping from a creative perspective, rethink it. So I am so glad, the whole, oh, I was dumb, or I didn't do well, or I'm not very creative, or whatever goes on with almost everybody at some point. Wow, what if we just gave ourselves freedom to create without that?
Yeah. And like I was like, I kept saying, well, when I do the next thing, it'll be funnier. And it's like, no, just allow it to be funny now. And
Yeah.
so these are just really helpful little tips. And I'm not looking ahead. I'm just like going, okay, this is fun today. And it's really more fun to work on.
Yep. Yep. So just so everybody knows, we're also on the structure side, we got to make sure that the story works. But you see, once we start getting into the what ifs, now we're starting to build in comedy, and we're going to build in comedy in pretty much every step that we take from now on. So thank you, Kristen, for that. Anything else you want to say?
That's it. Thank you.
Okay. All right, cool. Let's go to Tita.
There, I got the audio. I want to thank you for the structure that you give in the questions that you have as prompts for the AI. They are brilliant. They pull together everything you've taught in other classes. And what I did was I answered them myself before going to AI. So I had one column, which were my ideas. And then I asked the same questions of AI. Often they had better ones or more ones, and I was able to, because I had them in two columns right next to each other, I could take or bold the things in the AI that I really liked, move them into mine, get rid of mine that weren't as good, and I kind of merged them, and it was so useful. I can't tell you. Thank you. And I'm glad you
Good
got
for
your
you.
horse safe.
Thank you. Thank you. That's so excellent process. Well done. That's really, we want to be creative also. I think the other thing that AI does that we're not really giving credit for yet is that it's helping us, because it helps us think out of the box. It's also helping us be more creative. As long as you do kind of what you just said you're doing, right? Which is you're making sure you're bringing your creativity, not just like cheating on the test, so to speak. So that's our job, is to continually bring creativity to the process and then to learn from when it brings creativity. You know, anytime it's thinking differently than you, and you look and you go, oh, wow, that's a good idea. What did it do? How did it think to get there? Sooner or later, you'll start thinking that way. So good. Anything else, Tita?
No.
Okay, let's go to questions. If you have a question, go down to the React button, click raise hand. We're going to go to Brenda first while everybody else is deciding on their question.
Can you still hear me?
I can.
So it was just a play off of the structure you gave us, the 4-act, because that was really good. It tuned into me where I needed to put my ideas in which section. But because it's kind of contained, it confused me, because in a normal play, in a normal feature or something, you might do a midpoint and then you might cut somewhere else to a different scene somewhere else. But in this particular comedy, you're potentially in the same room. So do you do your slug lines, the corner of the room, the other corner of the room? Or is this something where the camera just moves from one place to the other? I don't know how to write it so that my ideas come into that 4-act structure without looking like you're standing in a room for 4 acts, never moving.
So I have a couple of questions to ask you, but if you're talking a contained in a single room, what I'd be doing is I'd be looking at the room and saying, what are the locations inside that room, right?
Okay.
Give them some kind of meaning, right? It's like over in this corner, this thing's happening, and over in that corner, that thing's happening, and maybe you've just divided it so that people have their own space and stuff like that. This, I don't know how you have it set up. But here's the other question. If what you're trying to do is are you trying to do a contained movie or TV
No.
series? What are you doing?
No, it's based off a true story. It's a group, almost like you saw the comedy friends, and they all react in their apartments, or they all react with whatever Joey and Jennifer Aniston and all those people are doing. So most of the action happens around the protagonist in a coffee shop, and the others are coming and going. But I had concerns about how you break that down so that the pacing doesn't feel like it's too long, too boring.
Okay, hang on. So I want you to answer my question because you didn't answer it. Are you doing a contained movie or a TV series?
It would be a TV series. So this
Okay,
is
so-
a 60-minute pilot.
Okay. So you, for some reason, let me say it this way. I'm listening and it sounds to me like you're trying to operate off of the sitcom model. Is that right?
I started out it being a 30-minute sitcom, but it's actually a dramedy. It deals with some heavy stuff. So then I moved it to the 60-minute, and I'm confused because I've never worked in this genre before.
Is it a serial story?
Yes.
So if I looked at the entire season, I'd say there's an arc all the way across the season, right?
Yes.
So we start in basically one kind of situation, and by the end, something big has changed that they had to fight through in order to get it to happen. Is that right?
Yes, but once you understand what's happening, it could also be looked at individual pieces.
Of course. But so it's like part of what I'd be looking at is your serial story. I'd be saying, okay, where does it start? Where does it end? What is the journey that's going to go on? And then based on that, each episode is going to give you another step.
Right.
Each episode, you're going to step into a new conflict. You're going to go beyond what you went through on the last one. But here's what I wouldn't do. If you're trying to do let's say an 8-episode or a 13-episode or whatever it is, TV series, what I wouldn't be doing is doing it based on the sitcom model. I wouldn't be just having it be every time there's just a situation and now everybody's just, joking about that and all that kind of thing. I'd give them real true stories where they're dealing with things, and there's different. You're going to have multiple characters, but each one of them has an arc. They have things happening, and they have conflicts that they're dealing with, and those kinds of things, and then build the comedy around it. But you can decide whatever you'd like. I don't know if I've answered your question. I'll just say, doing the 30-minute sitcom as a 60-minute sitcom is a tremendous amount of work. There's a reason they do it at 30 minutes.
Right.
Yeah, it's like, wow, that's just coming up with that much comedy and having that much different interactions between those people and that kind of thing that it's like that's a lot of work. You
Right.
need to be really, really good at comedy to be able to pull that off. Like, it needs to be the thing you're best at.
Yeah. And okay.
Yeah. So just start looking at the bigger picture. What is that bigger picture? Because that's going to give you at least a story that'll work all the way across an entire season, and that'll give you the drama that's going on, and then you build in comedy just like we're doing. So we're really just now stepping into the comedy for real. So you'll find it.
Okay.
Okay. All right.
I'm going to let somebody else talk, but I'd like to ask you one more. So go ahead
Okay,
and take
but-
care, folks.
Okay, but so just sit with that for a little bit and see if that starts to make sense to you. All right, Tita, did you have another question?
I did. A quick one. Your thoughts about subplots. Do you just pick them randomly with any character, or are you trying to weave them through the plot, like each subplot has a reason to fit in to support the plot, the main arc?
So the first thing, remember, you could look at, like, let's say you have 4 main characters. You can create a subplot for every one of them. And again, a subplot is, in general, is a lead character and a supporting character. And the supporting character may bring almost all the comedy or the dynamics between them, or or what their mission is, what they're trying to accomplish. You can do any of those that you'd like. And one way to do it is to go, all right, let me list my 4 lead characters, and then how many other characters are there? What if there was a subplot between this character and that one? And then what if there was one between this one and that one? What would they be? And again, you're looking for possible comedy, so use the questions that we talked about today and see what comes to you on that. Now, did I answer your question, or was there anything else to it? Okay, you're good. All right, cool. Eugene.
My mic on there? Okay. I have 2 quick questions. One is, the chat GPT is kind of taking the place of the forum right now, right? I don't have to put anything in the forum, or do I?
Or are you asking, are we using forums for this?
Not for this, are we? We're using ChatGPT to get feedback, right?
Right, that's right.
Yeah. Okay, I just want to make sure that I wasn't missing something on that. And then the second thing was, I wanted to get into one of the other classes, but it's not letting me get into it for some reason. And I went to support, so.
Okay, just a
And they
second.
haven't
So you're asking,
responded yet. So,
you're
yeah.
asking a customer service question. Stay
Uh-huh.
afterwards.
Okay, I'll stay afterwards for that one.
Okay.
Okay.
All right, let's go to Tom.
Hey, Hal, how are you?
Good.
So my question's, I think, a little more general. I have been writing forever, love doing it, but my fear with AI and just the way things are going, just seeing how writers are getting paid on, maybe write a script and maybe you'll get paid later. It has me thinking of different ways to monetize writing.
Okay, but hang on.
YouTube and
Okay, go ahead.
is this
Go
off,
ahead.
if this is off track, I can stop. But
I don't know.
I
Let's see.
I do want to continue to write with comedy. I just was curious if you kind of see other ways, like YouTube or social media to get your writing out there, or if there's any thoughts on that.
If we're doing like the Power Players class right now, that would be a conversation I'd have. But the first thing I would say is let go of whatever the fears are. We're in an interesting situation at the moment that this is being videoed, which is this industry has been shut down for a long time. Writers have been out of work, and there's a lot of big writers that have been complaining constantly. And what they're talking about is the situation they're in at the present moment. So what's basically happening, I interviewed one here about 3 days ago. He's going back to work next week. But at the present moment, his viewpoint is so desperate and angry and filled with fear about the future and the present and everything else because he's been out of work for what, like 2 years, So it's like, and he said, at one point I got a janitor's job just to be able to make ends meet. So when people are talking right now, there's a lot of people out there talking about the fears and the past, how things have been, and it's influencing their perspective in a really bad way. Anytime somebody, let's say we have somebody who is trying out for the Olympics, they've always believed in themselves, they're going like crazy, and they get last place. If you talk with them 5 minutes after that, they're going to be in a deep, deep depressed place, most likely. And that's where these people are right now. What I found interesting about the conversation was that he couldn't think outside that pain. So if people are talking, if you're reading the things that a lot of WGA writers have been saying over the last year, they thought that when their strike ended, it would be over. They thought they were going to be fine at that point. They would go back to work. They were okay. And then they had to go through 2 more strikes after that. And
Hmm.
then once it all got resolved, then the studio decided to wait till January. And then the worst thing that happened was we got to January, everybody was starting back to work, and we had these fires and it shut everything down, right? So it's like they haven't just been beat up once, they've been beat up 5 or 6 times in a really bad, dramatic way. And they're in pain. So that's not the future you're looking for.
Right.
Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So whatever you can do, I would start at just first look and realize when somebody tells you it's really dismal and that kind of thing, they're talking out of the past. They're talking out of the pain they've gone through. If you talk to those same people in a month and they're back to work, like I've interviewed about 6 writers who are back to work and they stopped saying all that stuff. They're in a different place. Now, it's not perfect. There are things that are not so good for writers, but just always keep this in mind. If you're creating your vision for the future, you don't want to create it out of someone else's pain.
I like that.
You want to create a vision that will move you forward, that will keep you excited, that will keep you writing and creating, whether it's this or anything else. If you decide to create some kind of business like a YouTube channel and stuff like that, it's like, don't go talk to the failures, talk to the ones that are succeeding, or start looking for what's going to make it work. But keep yourself motivated and moving forward and knowing that you can do it. You know, so
Thank you. Yeah, that was very nice. Thanks.
and sorry if this is, when I'm talking about this stuff, it's like there no always know this, there's always a way. There's always a way to make what you want happen. It's just in general, we spend most of our time in the same box we were in before we tried to do this, or the same box that we created right now, or the ones that they're in. If somebody is going to find a way out of that. And that's what I found when I was interviewing A-list screenwriters was I would listen to their stories and I'd ask them, how did you get started? What was the point that you broke in? What happened in the year before you broke in? And what was the change for you? And they found a way.
Mm.
They did whatever it took. They learned, like you're learning right now, right? You're finding things, you're moving forward. Keep doing that. I would just make a list. I had a huge breakthrough the other day. There are people in your life that, and this is somebody else has said this. There are people in your life that give you energy, and there are people in your life that suck energy,
Mm.
right? They're called emotional vampires. But you could also look at it this way. There are people in your life that inspire you, and there are people in your life that shut you down. What I would be doing is I'd be focusing on the ones that inspire you and go with them.
Yes.
And that's just for everybody. So thank you, Tom. Anybody else have
Thank you.
other questions? You got just remember this. People look at this industry, and this is just for everybody to know. People look at this industry a lot and they think, oh, the geniuses are up there, or the ones who are perfect are up there. They're the ones that are succeeding, or the ones that have the most connections and all those kinds of things. And yes, all of that ultimately ends up being true, but every one of them was where you are at one point or another. The only exceptions to that would be the ones that, their dad is Steven Spielberg. And there are some like that. But I interviewed a whole bunch of A-list writers who were just exactly like you and who talked about how they went through this, how there was a point where they thought their writing was great, but other people weren't appreciating it. So they had to raise their game. There was a point where they all had breakthroughs along the way because they kept asking the question, and there were points where people told them they couldn't do it, it would never happen, and then they found a whole different path. I talked with this guy named Seth Smith Graham. Uh, he was a guy, he tried to break in. He got his projects to a whole bunch of people. It wasn't happening for him. And he had to make ends meet. He was trying to just pay for his little tiny apartment. So he went to a small publisher and had this idea of doing mashup novels. Now, some of you have probably already heard this story, but just think about it for a moment. He said at that point, he was a good writer who had had no success. They did a couple of mashup novels. One of them was Pride and Prejudice and Zombies. How many people saw that movie? A couple? Okay. It actually was a good movie. He did a good job on it. But they did it as a novel, and it got picked up. They got it, the small publisher got it to somebody who was in the industry, who got it to a studio, and that was his big moment. After that, he did a whole bunch of other things. He did the Dark Shadows movie and a couple of others. But he also ended up producing a movie called It. I don't know if you heard of this one. It was a horror flick. How many people have seen It? A couple of you? Okay. It made $700 million and he's rich now. He also is producing and writing like a whole bunch of the big, really big movies that are based on comics and those kinds of things. So he's had tremendous success, but if you talked with him a week before he made that deal, even while he was doing it, by the way, he said he did a bunch of those mashup novels, and he was barely paying for his little tiny apartment. And then it changed. But it was like one way wasn't working, so he went a different way and just kept taking steps. You can do this. It's just a matter of you continuing to take the steps, not stopping, continuing to learn, and every time something doesn't work, find a better way and move it forward. We've got lots and lots of strategies. You already have lots of strategies. Somebody in here is going to end up with an incredible comedy movie or TV series that we're going to talk about for the rest of our lives. So anything else before we close out?
Can I just ask one more question?
Yeah.
Have you used Claude, Anthropic's AI?
Yes.
I think it is very funny. Like it compared to ChatGPT, so my question is, how much do you need to change from what they give you to like avoid copyright issues, or is that above the too far?
Oh, well, no, when copyright basically is this, it's the question of the final expression. So if you use pretty much what ChatGPT gives you all the way across the board, you won't get a copyright. And
Yeah.
Claude or any other AI, because the AI created that. We're just using it to brainstorm, and then out of that, you can use whatever things you want, but you have to let them know if AI created the majority of your script, you have to tell them. Because you don't want to use this to end up getting a federal felony.
Nothing funny about that. Maybe a good story will come out of it later, but
I don't think spending 5 years in a federal penitentiary is going to really help you. I don't know. There might be some comedy situations, but you can get there a lot faster. So it's just about the final expression. If you make sure that whatever you're writing you are rewriting it and bringing you to the table and all of that kind of thing, you're in great shape. If you use AI to brainstorm, that's totally okay. I've talked with copyright law attorneys about this. Using AI to brainstorm ideas and strategies and scenes and stuff like that, totally fine, as long as you are bringing you to the table to write it.
And just to be very specific, if I used one of Claude's jokes, like is that good?
It's not significant then in that
Okay.
case, right? It's like it needs to, we're talking about a significant portion. So For instance, if you use, let's say you have 4 lead characters and one of them, everything that's written came from AI. Okay, then in that case, you have to acknowledge that that character was written by AI.
Right.
And in that case, you will get a copyright on everything but that character.
Hmm.
Now, that may not sound like that much, but it actually is something. If AI completely wrote your final act, then you would have to say, AI wrote the climax and the resolution and the ending. And in that case, you would lose copyright on that.
Hmm.
It would be an exception. So, I just use AI for brainstorming.
Yeah.
And use it for feedback, but don't write exactly what AI gave you. So
Great. Thank you.
you bet. All right. Okay. How many people are feeling a little depressed? Can I see your hands? Okay, good. All right, let's just check. Any last questions before we close out?
I'd just like to mention that when Hollywood was getting just atrocious, Mary Pickford and Errol Flynn and a bunch of other people got together and created their own
Studio production company.
Scene. And Jack Black and a whole bunch of other artists, comedians, started their own little repertory, working it out. So that's my solution, I think, to all of this egregious stuff that's going on, courtesy of the Digi Boys from Silicon Valley and so on. Just if you don't like the news, go out and make some of your own and collaborate with people that you can trust. That's it.
Yeah, good idea. So, okay, cool. All right, you guys have fun this week. When we meet next week, we'll be taking it to the next level for comedy, but right now we got to get our structure and plot working. So just have fun, keep brainstorming, keep thinking outside the box. Sooner or later, you will find it. Bonnie, do you have something else?
Yeah, I have a technical question. Can I
Then wait until we're done.
Okay, cool.
So, all right. Other than that, I will talk with you next week. You guys have a good week. Bye-bye, everyone. Just a second.